Welcome back to LEO Radio. My name is Jim Harris.
I'm Phil Rizzo.
And we are going to be talking about a topic today that we kind of spurred up some stuff a few weeks ago. Some case law came out of New Jersey regarding marijuana, officers' use of marijuana off duty. Legal use here in the state of New Jersey, marijuana is legal.
Yes.
And there were some court cases that came out because officers were fired under some different things, but either way, they got their jobs back, and
one did not.
Well, one did not, because it was illegal use.
Correct.
He did not purchase it correctly. He didn't go through legal channels to get his
Correct.
weed. So if you're going to get weed, you got to get it legal.
Correct.
All right. So that stirred up a whole host of issues.
Yes, all over the place, and I think we are in a position where we need to look at. Just because it's marijuana, it doesn't mean it's a new problem. It doesn't mean it's a new issue. We've literally been dealing with this since the 30s. Well,
yeah, with prohibition, and then a lot of things coming out of prohibition. We'll get to that in a minute.
Right.
But legalization, it's coming. The legalization of marijuana throughout the United States is a growing popularity issue, and it's coming.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the federal government has decreased it and got it away from that opioid classification that it was in, so that it was a Schedule 3, and it's now a Schedule 3. It was a Schedule 1, and I think that declassification or declassifying and dropping of the classification is one of those things that's the trend we're going.
So there's two big issues that really surfaced after our social media post. One of which had to do with the federal firearms statute and who can possess a firearm legally, and we're going to get to that in a minute. And the other argument was cannabis-induced psychosis. So for this episode, we're going to focus really on those two specific areas. And let's talk about cannabis-induced psychosis first.
The marijuana that's out there today is not the marijuana that we saw, not that I saw because I wasn't alive, but the marijuana that our parents may have seen in the 60s, and even the marijuana we may have seen in college, the stems and seeds. This marijuana is very potent. The strains it's a big business now, and these folks are using science to perfect these strains and make it very strong.
So one of the first arguments that people say, some, are like this, they're making this up, this is something new, cannabis-induced psychosis. People have been smoking marijuana for years, for decades, and nobody has this cannabis-induced psychosis. So let's tackle that first, because it is an actual recognized condition. It is a substance-induced condition. It's a psychotic disorder. Some of the things that produce, it's like paranoia, hallucinations, you got delusional, and that is the case. But does it happen to everyone who smokes marijuana? I know a lot of people who gave many years to that cause, and they never had this.
I agree. I think that if we look at this through the lens that we looked at with alcohol, there are plenty of people who are violent drunks and become extremely violent drunks. There are plenty of people who are very happy drunks too, and don't have a violent bone in their body. So I think that the way someone is going to react to a substance is on them. It's a very individualized.
And I think a lot of people are right away, they're right away going to jump to, oh, well, what about this as their argument, But again, it's not something that everybody who smokes marijuana is going to get. And they have, if the research has been done on this, it really is those who are heavy users. It's somebody who's using a lot of marijuana, heavy use marijuana. Those are the ones more likely to have this issue.
And you would hope that that's not going to be who you're dealing with in law enforcement, because in every agency that allows their officers, that has an order that says that officers that mentions marijuana, they can't be intoxicated while on duty. So there's going to be that break in time.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that. It's like if you had an officer that was heavy using alcohol, they would have a lot of signs and symptoms and issues with the alcoholism aspect that we would have to definitely take care of as well. So it's not, this isn't really the weekend warrior. This isn't the guy who has a gummy one night to go to sleep, or he's out on the weekend, off duty, on the weekend. He's not going to work in a couple hours, and he's, smoking a doob. Right. So I think that argument of, well, everybody's going to get it, what about this? I think that's kind of a fake argument.
Well, I think it's an easy argument for an agency to use to say this is why we're doing it. It kind of that blanket liability approach of, well, there's the possibility that this could happen, so instead of me dealing with that one situation, I'm going to deal with the entire agency. And we talk about that in our management and our leadership classes of how that's a horrible way to lead, a horrible way to manage, but it's also a very easy way to do it. So, if there's the possibility that could happen to one officer, we might as well just say that every officer has to do this.
Absolutely, it's a blanket policy, blanket way of doing business. But so as I was going through the prep for this and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, what about other psychosis? Maybe the argument was they have this issue, they have this disorder, but they just happen to be smoking marijuana. Is that the connection that somebody, it's cannabis-induced psychosis, instead of saying, this is a substance abuse or a substance-induced psychosis?
I mean, my opinion on this is I think this just highlights the importance of and the necessity of every agency to have a meaningful, not just have it, but having meaningful early warning system. Because that's where you're going to catch this.
You know what? And I never didn't even think about that as the angle, but you're right.
But it's to me, it's not an angle, because I look at it as this is just something that should be a normal police operation. Our first line supervisors are the ones who see these officers every day, and they're going to notice those little things of, hey, Johnny's come in and his eyes have been glassy every morning. Now, or Johnny's sitting in briefing every morning and he's using Visine. That could just be that he's sleepy, but the point is we need to have a meaningful conversation and a meaningful early warning system that's going to capture these things. And I think we would probably be able to either alleviate some of these false arguments of this, or solidify that, hey, this is an actual problem.
That's an excellent point, because that actually segues into what I'm about to say is the cannabis in this particular case, the cannabis is what they're calling to be the trigger. However, there is substance abuse induced psychosis that is not cannabis induced.
Right.
So this is not just a cannabis-induced psychosis issue. It could be other substances. And what you're saying dives right into the fact of, forget the aspect of cannabis. We have to look at, is our officer being affected by something, and that thing is impacting his job? And the early warning system is going to help us uncover whether it's cannabis, whether it's alcohol, whether it's Xanax. It could be anything, any painkiller.
The reality of this whole thing is, as a police administrator, I don't care if it's Xanax, cannabis, alcohol. The point is, I have an officer who has a problem, and what the substance is of no consequence. Unless it's an illegal substance where it's, cocaine, heroin, but one of those situations. But the reality is, we have officers who take Ambien every night to go to sleep.
Right.
Does that mean they have a problem? I don't know. There's an underlying thing that's going on there. But the point is, you have to look at the fact of what is going on beyond just the substance issue. And
that's going to dovetail right into the aspect of policy. And you had mentioned it earlier about how policy needs to play, meaningful policy. Got to have a meaningful policy. A lot of agencies right now, they're throwing out that zero tolerance policy, especially right now. You're starting to see states where legalization is coming in. They're like, well, we still have a zero tolerance policy on marijuana use. Or, okay, well, why are you and for the record, I am not for or against marijuana use. That was one of the things that was popped up on the social. You're all for, I'm not for it. First off, actually watch the episodes before you make an assumption of what we're talking about. Listen to the information before you jump to conclusions about what we're for. But we're neutral on this. I'm not on the job anymore, so I don't care if you do. I don't care if you don't. This is an evolving topic that we are going to have to work out as a profession. So a lot of these states where legalization is coming into play, they're still putting out zero tolerance policy where you're not allowed to do it. Well, why can't they do marijuana, but yet they can still take a lot of pain pills, still take Ambien on a nightly basis, drink beers all day long? There's no zero tolerance policies there.
I think that we're looking at the fact of, and again, as Jim said, neither for nor against. I'm just about following the law. My issue comes about is that when you're looking at, let's look at commercial driver's licenses. There's a very strict standard as to what you can do with a commercial driver's license. And part of the reason why it doesn't matter if marijuana gets legalized or not, there's no instrument right now that they can say, okay, you have this much in your system right now and it's this active amount. With alcohol, you can blow into a PBT or a breathalyzer, an Alka-Test, whatever, and it will tell you that this is how much is in your system. So I think that the technologies are, at least when I was a police administrator, that was always my issue with, if someone's taking alcohol, I can test them for alcohol and know exactly what they have in their system right then and there. If someone has marijuana in their system, that could have been from 26 days ago, depending on how long it stays in their system.
Right. So it's the unknown of, well, it's the gray area of like, I know what I can do with alcohol. I don't know what I can do with marijuana. So, and that scares a lot of people, and that's another area that's just going to be evolving. But like we were saying before, alcohol is legal. We don't regulate the off-duty use of legal use of alcohol, but we do regulate what they do just prior to coming on duty and on duty. Right. So that aspect, I see that is where we're going to have to start really formulating our policy of what we control. What we control is their on-duty behavior, their on-duty use.
And I think the other bigger thing that comes along with this is marijuana is still a federally banned substance. So until that federal ban comes into play, there's always going to be that gray area. The administrations are always very much for states' rights and everything else. Well, if we're going to be for state rights on one thing, we have to be for states' rights on the other thing too. We have to take it both ways, with the good and the bad. I'm not saying that this is a good or a bad issue, but the things you agree with and the things you don't agree with.
It's so true. So then that brings us right into the other argument that so many people are talking about, and it's like the federal firearms law statutes and how an officer has to possess a firearm as part of his job, but federal law says that marijuana users may be prohibited from carrying a firearm if they use marijuana. So
but that law also says that habitual drunkards can't possess firearms.
Exactly. So this is where it is. This is where we're starting to evolve with that, because a lot of organizations right now are terminating people because of they're found to be having legal recreational use of marijuana, and they've been terminated for a positive drug test after the fact. They were not on duty, no impairment on duty. This was off duty, legal, lawful use of recreational marijuana in legal states, and they're terminated under the guise of the federal firearms law. I, as an agency, can't employ you because you violated the federal law. So this is where the really, really gray area is coming into play, because it's got to be mitigated in the courts.
So another gray area that I say, and again, we do travel all over the country. We have students from all over the country, and we have contacts all over the country. I'm hard pressed to think of another state that allows officers to smoke marijuana other than New Jersey. I can't think of. I've talked to officers from several other states, and most other states that have legalized marijuana have taken the stance of it's still federally banned. We're taking a there's not enough measuring components for us to be able to determine intoxication. So the state is actually saying it's a zero tolerance policy. New Jersey is really, I can't, I'm hard pressed to think of another state where it's legal.
It's going to be, New Jersey is going to be the trailblazer of case law of whether it is or isn't going to be permitted. And now we started to see a lot of, and we talked about it in our social media post, we started to see some of the circuit courts handle some of these issues under the Second Amendment aspect. And one case was actually just brought up, it was heard in March of 2026 at the Supreme Court level. And the argument is exactly what you said. It's not, the law wasn't created to stop the casual user from owning a firearm. That was not the intent of the law. And it's actually, the government is putting forth that it's not the intent of that, but the intent is to stop the habitual use. So they're not looking to go after the weekend warrior. And you said it right. It goes after those who are even habitual alcoholics as well. So they aren't supposed to be carrying firearms either.
And while we want to actually, if you know, again, we not to brush the subject or to kind of you know, bring it up, but we have plenty of officers that are recovering alcoholics that are, you know, have sought treatment and have been sober for this many years, and but I think by definition they're habitual drunkards, and you know, do we bar them? We don't bar them from owning a gun. Again, not saying that I agree or disagree with either statement. I'm just saying, you know, we have a lot of people that like to say, oh, past practice. Well, past practice is that.
I 100% agree. So this is where it really is going to come into play, because they fought it under the Second Amendment aspect of that law, and you know, no decision has come out yet. But we're going to be, you know, taking a look at that, because it's really going to carve the way of what we are going to be looking at moving forward with it.
Yeah, and if the Supreme Court says, hey, this is what the intention of the law was, then that's what the Supreme Court says, and you go with it. You know, this might be a premature conversation, and it might be very simple, where they say, nope, they're not supposed to have it, and there you go. You know, if the Supreme Court comes down with that decision, that's going to nullify what New Jersey's saying, and you know, I don't know, and again, I don't know what ramifications it's going to have for the cases that were just decided in New Jersey, if they're going to be able to retroactively, you know, go after them again, but.
It's true. Yeah, it's a brand new area for everything. You know, employment law, not only with law enforcement, but you know, any profession that has drug policies in place, you know, it's going to come into play for that. But until the Supreme Court gives their final answer on this, we're really on a holding pattern for that. And it really brings it to, where are we at right now? And the reality right now is, if you're in a state where legalization is happening or it has happened, you have to open up to a policy discussion. I don't care what you as police chief think is right or wrong with smoking marijuana. That's besides the point. If the state law says it's legal, then it's legal.
Right.
You have to have a realistic policy discussion on what are the boundaries for your people off duty.
And likewise, I'm also of the mindset, you know, you're talking about from the chief's standpoint, I'm going to talk about it from an officer's standpoint. Is smoking that joint or having that gummy in a state where it's in limbo, do you want to be that test case where you're out of work for 2 or 3 years, and you're out of work for 2 or 3 years, and yeah, you might win and you might get your job back and get all that back pay, but do you want to be that test case? Is that gummy worth your career and the possibility of throwing your career over? My say on that is no.
Now, I'm 100% with you. And like you said before, this is not the first time we have gone through a paradigm shift with substances.
Right.
You know, prohibition.
I mean,
1930s.
I'm sure chiefs back in 1930 were like, this profession is going down the tubes. As alcohol is going to kill us, it's going to be horrible. And you know, I mean, how many years later?
So back then they were like, oh, we surrendered. But this is just a shift in the idealism of today's generations, is that we did not surrender. We just evolved.
Right.
We shifted from more of criminal prohibition to more of, let's do rational regulation. So that might be, that is where we are.
Well, I mean, and the police should reflect what society wants, because let's be honest, like, it was once said that the people are the police and the police are the people. Somewhere along the line, it was said, and society changes. Society's wants, needs, and norms change, and I've said this time and again, and it was actually hanging on my wall in my office when I had my office at the PD. One of the most dangerous things that any police administrator can ever say is, we do it this way because that's the way we always did it.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at policy and we say, oh, and I'm not saying change for change is what you don't just change for change. Change should be meaningful. Yep. But if society is changing, we have to change with the times.
Yeah, we can't just do it the same old way, because that's the way we've always done it.
Right.
And I think with that, that's a great spot to end this conversation, because this is not going to be the end of this.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Where, when that Supreme Court case comes out, and we're going to obviously talk about that then, and the impact it's going to have, because that will also expand into even more areas. Right. So that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for reviewing, and we'll see you next time.